Rain made the world smaller. It stitched the riverlands into a single sodden cloth. Road and ditch and field all the same black and brown. The puddles fat as mirrors, the wind full of wet ash. Arya Stark kept her head down beneath a torn hood that had once been somebody's cloak, and she listened to the mud. Mud had voices if you walked long enough. It sucked at boots like fingers. It whispered where the ground was soft. It warned you when a horse would slip. Behind her, Sandor Clegane swore at everything that moved. He swore at the horse that limped and at the rain that never stopped, at Arya's smallness that made her harder to see in the gloom. His sword hilt knocked against his mail with every step, a steady, impatient sound. The hound did not like walking. The hound did not like roads without men to threaten. "Ain't no one left to ransom in this God's-forsaken swamp," he muttered, though he said it as if the swamp had personally cheated him. Arya didn't answer. Talking made the cold creep in through teeth. Talking gave him openings. She saved her breath and her words for the list that lived behind her eyes. Names came with the rhythm of her steps, the beat of her heart, the pulse of the rain. Cersei, Joffrey, the Hound. The Hound's name had been on her list once, when she was smaller and angrier and had still believed in lists the way other girls believed in songs. Say it enough and it becomes true. Now she was with him and lists changed shape. The world changed shape. Something pale skittered out of a ditch and vanished, rabbit, maybe, or rat. Arya's stomach tightened at the thought of either. Hunger was always there. It lived between her ribs like a stone she could never swallow. Sometimes it was worse when she could smell other people's cooking. Sometimes it was worse when she couldn't smell anything at all. They passed a burned croft where the roof had fallen in like a collapsed jaw. A charred beam pointed at the sky, accusing. In the mud around it, footprints had hardened and filled with rainwater, making a trail of small lakes that led nowhere. Arya stopped once and stared at a child's shoe half buried near a stump. She did not pick it up. She did not look too long. If you looked too long, grief found a way inside. Grief was a bigger enemy than any Frey or Lannister. Up ahead, torchlight blinked between trees. Men's voices drifted on the wind. Laughter, coarse and loose with ale. Sandor slowed, one hand sliding to his sword as if it belonged there. Arya's fingers went to the little blade at her belt without thinking. Needles were better than swords, Syrio Farrell had said. Needles slipped between ribs. "Stay behind me," Sandor said, as if she ever did. Arya moved anyway, careful, silent. She became Aerie in her head, the boy she had been made into by fear and need. Aerie didn't flinch. Aerie listened. The road bent around a stand of trees and opened onto a sagging in that had seen better kings. Its sign creaked on iron chains, blank where a painted tree had once been. Horses stood under a lean-to, steaming, and men in patched mail clustered around a fire that hissed in the rain. Their cloaks were the color of old leaves, their laughter the color of rot. Arya saw the crossing on their cloaks before she saw their faces. 2 towers, a bridge between, the twins, Frey. Her stomach did something strange, as if it remembered a story her mind had not yet told. The twins meant Walder Frey. Walder Frey meant the crossing her brother had taken. Walder Frey meant oaths and insults and the way men smiled when they meant harm. Sandor made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Look at that. Mice with a badge." The Frey men were not careful with their tongues. Ale made men stupid. Rain made them loud. Arya crouched in the shadow of a wagon wheel, close enough to catch their words, far enough to vanish if she needed to. Weddings at the twins. One of them was saying, cheeks bright with drink. "Biggest wedding you'll ever see. Lord Walder's got half the Riverlands invited. And the king in the north himself, gods rot him." "Aye," said another, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "And if the wolves come to eat, there'll be dogs waiting with teeth. That's what my cousin says. He's in the kitchens. Says they're laying in wine enough to drown a kraken." Laughter again. A third man leaned in, voice dropping like it was a secret worth savoring. Music, too. Lord Walder's hired musicians from Lannisport. Real ones. Not the bloody pipers we get at fairs. Sandor's hand tightened on Arya's shoulder, hard enough to bruise. "Stay," he breathed, and she knew he'd heard it too. Music, Lana sport, a wedding with soldiers and wine and secrets. Arya's list stirred awake, hungry. A wolf in a hall, a song that wasn't a song. In her head, she saw her mother's hands smoothing her hair in Winterfell, gentle as feather down. She saw Robb Stark's grin the day he'd put a wooden sword in her hand and told her to swing, and swing hard. She saw Bran falling and Sansa crying, and the Red Keep stones slick with her father's blood. She had not seen her family in so long that sometimes she could pretend they were all alive somewhere, warm and safe and waiting. Pretending was a kind of mercy. A wedding like that was not mercy. A wedding like that was a trap. Arya's mouth went dry, even with rain on her lips. Somewhere far away, thunder rolled like a cartload of stones. She looked up at Sandor Clegane's burned face, and for a heartbeat the scarred flesh seemed less monstrous than the smile on a Frey man's mouth. "I'm going to the twins," she whispered. Sandor snorted. "You're going wherever I take you. That's the point." Arya didn't argue. Arguments were for people who believed words could change men. She only watched the Freys drink and laugh, and she listened to the sound of their mirth against the rain. It sounded like knives being sharpened. Sandor dragged her away from the road fire before the Frey men noticed their eyes. He did it with the easy certainty of a man used to taking what he wanted. An arm around her shoulders, a shove through the inn's sagging door, a muttered threat that was half habit. Inside, the air was warmer but foul with smoke and wet wool. The innkeep watched them with the flat stare of a man who had seen too many soldiers to care which side they wore. They found a corner that wasn't already occupied by bodies and dogs. Sandor threw down a few coins, bad ones, and demanded stew that tasted of water and old bones. Arya ate without tasting. Her hands shook, not from hunger, but from the words that kept repeating in her skull. Wedding at the Twins, King in the North, music from Lannisport. She had heard songs about weddings in Winterfell, how the hall would smell of roast and spice, how the laughter would rise to the rafters like birds. She'd imagined her brother's wedding once, long ago, when Robb was only Robb and not a king. Now she imagined wolves penned behind doors. Sandor ate like he meant to offend the gods. He tore at bread with his teeth and wiped grease from his lips with his sleeve. When he saw Arya staring past him, he followed her gaze to the Frey men outside, still drinking by their fire. "You think they're going to kill your precious brother?" he asked, as if asking whether it would rain again. Arya's spoon clinked against the bowl. "They said dogs with teeth." Sandor made a sound deep in his throat. "Every lord keeps dogs. Doesn't mean he's feeding them wolves." "They said music," Arya insisted, too sharp. She caught herself. Showing feeling was showing weakness. She swallowed it down like bitter ale. "They said real musicians." "So?" Sandor's one good eye narrowed. "You afraid of a song?" Arya thought of the singers in King's Landing, soft-voiced men with pretty hands who'd watched her father die. She thought of the Brotherhood stories and the ghost of High Heart's eyes, white as milk, seeing things no one else could. She thought of the way men used feasts to hide blades. "It's wrong," she said, and hated how small her voice sounded. Sandor leaned back, chair creaking. "Wrong is the Riverlands. Wrong is every man with a sword. Wrong is you thinking a little bird can peck out a lion's eye." Arya's fingers curled around the spoon. "I'm not a bird." "No," he agreed. "You're a pouch of silver to me. I want you alive." Arya stared at him until he looked away first, irritated. He could break men with his hands, but he didn't like being watched by a girl he couldn't quite control. Outside, the Frey men stumbled into the rain, still laughing. One of them paused to fumble in a saddlebag, and for a heartbeat Arya saw a sealed letter, red wax gleaming. He tucked it away quickly, unaware that a hungry girl's eyes had caught it. Letters mattered. Men died for ink and wax more than they died for swords. At Harrenhal, she had watched ravens fly out carrying orders, and she had watched men vanish afterward. The war moved on paper as much as it moved on roads. "What do you know about the twins?" Arya asked. Sandor's mouth twisted. "2 castles, 1 bridge. Old Lord Walder's got a long memory and a longer cock. He'll insult you while he takes your gold." "He let Robb cross," Arya said, more to herself than to Sandor. "Robb promised him things." "Promised him girls," Sandor corrected. "That's what lords do. Promise daughters. Marry off mistakes. Pay for passage." Arya's nails dug into her palm. A thought began to form, thin as a needle. Robb's mistake was love. The Freys' mistake was pride. Pride made men do cruel things when they felt laughed at. "They're going to hurt him," Arya said. Sandor's answer came too quickly. "And what will you do? Stab an old man in a hall full of swords? You're not in Bravos. There's no dancing master here to save you." Arya's heart hammered. She did not tell him about the coin Jaqen Hagar had given her, heavy and warm even after months, tucked into the seam of her clothing like a secret. She did not tell him that she had made vows to herself, little vows that were sharper than any lord's oath. She only thought of her mother's face and the way Catelyn Stark would smile when she was trying not to show fear. If her mother was going to that wedding, Arya's stomach turned. She pushed the bowl away. Sandor noticed. "Don't be stupid." Arya slid off the bench. "I'm going to sleep." He grabbed her wrist. "You're going nowhere." Arya looked down at his hand. Big as a spade, scarred, strong, and imagined it loosening in sleep. She imagined the keys at his belt. She imagined how men trusted too easily once they thought you were trapped. "I'm going to sleep," she said again, and made her voice dull. Sandor stared at her a long moment, then shoved her toward the back where the inn's rooms smelled of mildew and old piss. "If you run," he said, "I'll hunt you. I'll take your feet, little wolf." Arya nodded like she believed him. But as she lay on a pallet that was more straw than blanket, listening to the inn's groans and the rain's steady drumming, she did not think of running from Sandor Clegane. She thought of running toward the twins. She thought of poison, though she had never held any in her hands. She thought of how men laughed when they did not know death was already in the room. Sandor snored like an angry bear. It was not the gentle sound of a man who dreamed of warmth. It was the sound of a man who fought even in sleep, jaw clenched, hand near his knife as if he expected fire to come crawling through the cracks in the walls. Arya watched him from her pallet, the candle stub burning low, and she counted his breaths until they became predictable. Predictable was dangerous. Predictable meant you could move. Needle lay in her palm, light as a promise. She slid it back into its sheath without noise. In the corner, Sandor's boots were caked with mud, his cloak dripping onto the floor. His keyring glinted at his belt. Arya's eyes lingered there. Keys were power. Keys opened doors. Doors decided whether wolves lived. She did not know the twins' doors yet, but she would. The thought made her chest feel too tight. She tried to breathe like Syrio had taught her. Quiet, steady, the world narrowing to what mattered. What mattered was her mother, somewhere out there in the rain, believing in guest right because she had been raised to believe that even enemies honored bread and salt. What mattered was Robb Stark, who had been raised to believe that honor was armor. Arya had watched armor fail. She had watched honor bleed out onto stone. She slipped from the pallet and padded across the floor, bare feet finding the boards that did not creak. Sandor's snores hitched once, and Arya froze, heart in her throat. He shifted, muttered something in his sleep. Maybe a curse, maybe a name, and then the snore resumed, thick and steady. Arya moved again. At the foot of the chair where he slept, she knelt. The keyring hung heavy. She reached out slowly, careful as a cat, and lifted it. The metal clinked against another piece of metal. Quiet, but in the small room it sounded like a bell. Arya's blood turned to ice. Sandor's eyelids flickered. Arya did not pull the keys away. She held them still, like she belonged there, like she was only adjusting his belt so he would not be uncomfortable, like she was a servant girl in Winterfell, dutiful and harmless. Sandor's eyelids opened a sliver, one eye dull with sleep. "What are you doing?" he rasped. Arya did not jump. She forced her face to be empty. "You're going to lose them," she said softly. "Someone will steal them." Sandor's eye narrowed. He glanced down at the keys, then at her. For a moment, Arya thought he might strike her just to remind her who was big and who was small. Then he grunted, closed his eyes again. "Get back," he muttered. "Don't touch my things." Arya released the keys slowly and backed away. The candle's flame wavered as if laughing at her. She lay down again, but sleep did not come. Her mind ran like a hunted hare. If she could not simply slip away with Sandor's horse and leave him behind, she would have to make him let her go, or make him come. The Hound wanted a ransom. He wanted gold. He wanted to sell her to her family like a pig at market. If her family died at the twins, she was no longer a pouch of silver. She was only a burden. That might make him cut her loose. That might make him drag her away from the very place she needed to be. Arya bit her lip until she tasted blood. She needed to get ahead of the wedding, ahead of the trap, ahead of the knives hidden under music. She had no army. She had no banners. She had only herself and a small sword and a list of names. The list shifted in her head. Frey, Walder Frey, Lothar Frey, Black Walder. Names she barely knew, names she had never spoken aloud, names she could learn. Arya turned her face toward the damp wall and listened to the rain. It sounded like footsteps. Somewhere in that sound, she imagined the river at the twins, swift and dark, dividing two stone towers that had stood for centuries. Two doors, two sets of walls. A bridge that decided who crossed and who drowned. She imagined herself inside those walls, small and invisible. She imagined a cup of wine. She imagined poison blooming like a black flower. For the first time in days, hunger eased. Not because she had eaten, but because she had found something else to feed. Purpose. By the time the candle died, Arya had decided. She did not wake Sandor. Waking him would mean wrestling with him, pleading, being dragged back to the pallet by a fist around her wrist. Arya had been dragged enough. She had learned the truth of big hands and small bones. So she moved like a shadow and trusted the rain to cover her sins. The inn's back door stuck from swelling wood. Arya eased it open with the slow patience of winter. The night air slapped her, cold and wet, and the smell of mud filled her nose. For a moment she stood in the doorway, listening. The inn groaned behind her. Somewhere inside, a man laughed in his sleep. Sandor's snore rumbled on, unbroken. Arya stepped out. The lean-to where the horses stood was a darker patch of dark. The animals shifted, snorting softly, their eyes pale in the gloom. Arya found the smallest one, a narrow-chested gelding with ribs like ladder rungs. It was not Sandor's horse. Sandor's horse was too big, too loud, too slow with its lame leg. Arya wanted speed. Arya wanted a horse that could vanish into trees. She worked the knot on its rope with numb fingers. The rope was wet, swollen, stubborn. Her nails tore and pain flared. She swallowed it down. Pain was just another sound you learned to ignore. The knot gave. The rope slipped free. The horse jerked its head, startled, and Arya froze, hand on its muzzle. "Quiet," she breathed, as if the horse could understand. "Please." The animal's breath steamed against her palm. It did not bolt. That felt like a blessing. Arya let it out into the open, keeping close to its shoulder. Rain drummed on her hood. Mud sucked at her feet. Somewhere far off, thunder rolled again, and the world flashed white for a heartbeat. In lean-to fire outside where the Freys had been. The Freys were gone now, their fire reduced to embers. In that brief light, Arya saw Sandor's silhouette through the window of the inn room. Big, slumped, still. She waited for him to stir. He did not. Arya swung up onto the horse's back, awkward and quick. She had ridden before at Winterfell in better days. Back then, someone always helped her. Back then, horses were clean and fed and not terrified of the world. She kicked the gelding into motion, and they splashed into the road. At first, she rode hard, heart hammering, expecting Sandor's roar behind her, expecting iron hands closing around her waist. But the rain swallowed everything. The night swallowed everything. When she looked back, the inn was only a darker shadow among shadows. Freedom tasted like wet air and fear. She did not know the road to the twins, not truly. But roads all led to something, and Arya had learned to follow the river. Rivers were honest. Rivers went where they went. The trident's arms spread through the riverlands like veins. She kept to the sound of water whenever she could, angling north and east, toward the place she had heard named again and again by frightened men. The twins. The world around her was a wasteland of war. Once she passed a hamlet where a woman hung from an oak, her feet just brushing the mud. Once she saw wolves' eyes in the trees, yellow, watching, and her breath caught because she wanted to call out to them, to tell them she was one of them. But wolves did not answer, and Arya did not know if these were wolves or just dogs gone wild. Near dawn, the rain eased to a mist. The sky lightened to a sick gray. Arya's hands were stiff on the reins. She felt less like a girl and more like a bundle of cold clinging to a horse. She found a track that led to a cluster of huts by a stream. Smoke drifted from one chimney, thin and cautious. A crow sat on a fence post and watched her with patient eyes. An old woman stood outside the nearest hut, stirring something in a pot over a small fire. Her hair was a white tangle, her face lined like dried fruit. When she saw Arya, she did not flinch or smile. She only looked, as if measuring the weight of Arya's hunger. "You're far from home," the woman said. Arya's throat felt raw. "Aren't we all?" The old woman's eyes flicked to needle's hilt beneath Arya's cloak. "You've got steel, little one. Steel means trouble." Arya swallowed. "I need something else." The woman's spoon paused. The air smelled of bitter herbs. "What kind of something?" Arya looked past the woman at the hut's dark doorway, at the stream's cold flow, at the way the world always seemed to hide what it meant to do until the moment came. Then she said the word that had been growing in her mouth since the Frey men laughed by their fire. "Poison." The old woman did not gasp. She did not cross herself. She did not call Arya wicked. She only looked at the child in front of her. Mud-caked, hollow-cheeked, eyes too old, and she sighed like someone who had been asked for bread by the starving too many times. "Poison," she repeated, tasting the word. "That's a lord's tool, that is. Lords and cowards." Arya's hands clenched. "I'm not a lord." "No," the woman agreed. "You're small enough to be crushed between two boots and forgotten. That's why you want it." Arya said nothing. If she spoke, she would beg. Begging was for Sansa. Arya had learned different lessons. The woman motioned her inside with a tilt of her head. The hut was low and smoky, the air thick with herbs and damp. Bundles hung from rafters like dead birds. On a rough table, clay jars sat in crooked rows, their lids sealed with wax. A mortar and pestle lay stained dark. "What do you think poison is?" the woman asked, rummaging. "A way to kill," Arya said. The woman barked a laugh. "A way to kill without steel. A way to kill without looking someone in the eye. A way to kill and have folk blame the stew." Arya's stomach twisted, but she held her ground. "I need them to." She stopped, saying it made it real. The woman pulled out a small clay vial and held it up to the light. Inside, a fine powder clung to the sides, pale and innocent. "This one will make your belly churn and your head swim," she said. "Too much and you'll stop breathing. Too little and you'll only soil yourself and curse the cook." Arya stared at the vial as if it were a dragon egg. It looked too small to matter, but small things mattered. Needle was small. "What's it called?" Arya asked. The woman shrugged. "Names don't matter. It's ground seed and dried leaf and a bit of greycap. It grows in wet places, like this war." Arya's mouth went dry. "How fast?" "Fast enough if you know where to put it." The woman set the vial down and reached for another jar. "There's sweeter ones too. Ones that make a man sleep. Ones that make a woman's blood stop. Ones that make a heart turn to stone." Her fingers paused on a different jar. Then she pushed it away. "Those aren't for children." Arya's gaze flicked to the jar she'd pushed away. "I'm not a child." The old woman's eyes sharpened. That's what frightens me. For a moment, the only sound was the crackle of the fire and the soft patter of mist against the window. Then the woman leaned closer, her face close enough that Arya could smell onions on her breath. "Who do you want dead?" she asked. Arya could have lied. She could have said Lannisters. She could have said bandits. She could have said anyone. But something in the old woman's gaze felt like a knife. Lies slipped off it. "Freys," Arya said. "At the twins." The woman's mouth tightened. "Walder Frey's lot?" Arya nodded. "They're planning something. A wedding." The old woman sat back slowly, as if the fire had suddenly grown hotter. "Weddings are always poison," she said. "Men drink, men boast, men make promises they won't keep. Women cry, children learn what they are." She looked at Arya's small hands. "What are you planning, little wolf?" Arya's chest tightened. "Little wolf." The woman did not know what she had said, did not know the way those words hit like a hammer. "I don't know," Arya admitted, and it was the closest thing to truth she could manage. "I just know it's wrong. I just know." Her voice broke, and she hated it. She swallowed. "I just know my family will be there." The old woman's gaze softened a fraction, but only a fraction. Pity was a dangerous gift. "Family," she murmured. "That's the sharpest poison of all." She slid the vial across the table. "This will do what you want if you're careful. If you're not careful, it will do what it wants instead." Arya reached for it with trembling fingers. "How much?" The old woman picked up a pinch of powder between finger and thumb. "This much in a cup will make a strong man sweat and spew within a quarter hour. This much more." She let the powder fall back into the vial like dust. "Then you'll have corpses." Arya's heartbeat thudded in her ears. Corpses. She had seen corpses. She had stepped over them. She had slept near them. Corpses were everywhere, but choosing them was different. The woman took Arya's hand abruptly, turning it palm up. Her fingers were rough, stained green and brown. "You'll pay," she said. Arya swallowed. "I don't have gold." "You have something." The woman's eyes flicked to Arya's belt, to Needle's hilt. "Steel." Arya's hand tightened reflexively. Needle was hers. Needle was Jon Snow's gift. Needle was Winterfell. The old woman held her gaze. "Steel for poison. That's fair." Arya's throat burned. If she gave up Needle, she would be giving up a piece of herself. If she kept Needle, she might lose the rest of her family. She drew the sword slowly, laying it on the table. The metal looked too clean in the dirty hut. The old woman's hand hovered over it, almost reverent. "Go on, then," the woman said, taking the vial and pressing it into Arya's palm. "And remember, poison doesn't care who drinks." Arya closed her fingers around the clay. It felt warm from the woman's hand, heavy as a stone. Outside, the stream whispered toward the river, and the river whispered toward the twins. By midday, the land began to rise, and the air changed. Arya could smell the river before she saw it. Cold and thick with mud, carrying the scent of fish and rot and something older, something like stone. The road narrowed, hedges crowding in, and the ground became harder beneath the horses' hooves. Birds wheeled overhead, cawing, as if they already knew there would be feasting. Then the twins appeared out of the mist, and Arya's breath caught. Two castles, one on either bank, their towers punching up into the gray sky like clenched fists. A bridge arched between them, long and covered, a stone spine over green water. The river below surged swollen from rain, churning around pilings. Frey banners snapped in the wind. Two towers, bridged, the sigil that made Arya's stomach tighten. This place was not a hall. It was a throat. It was made to swallow men. She rode closer, keeping her shoulders hunched, her face hidden. She had traded Needle for poison, but she had not gone unarmed. A knife she'd stolen at the inn sat at her belt, small and sharp. A second blade hid in her boot. She wore her hair tucked under a cap, her clothes too big, her stance meant to be sullen and boyish. "Airy again," Arya was useful. At the gate, guards watched her approach with bored suspicion. One of them spat into the mud. "What you want?" Arya lifted her chin just enough to show a filthy, unremarkable face. "Work," she said, making her voice rough. "I can scrub. I can carry. I can. Everyone can," the guard said. His eyes swept over her thin frame. "We ain't hiring beggar boys." Arya swallowed. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the only coin she had left. A copper star she'd stolen from Sandor's pouch when he slept. Felt like theft, but so did breathing these days. She held it out on her palm. The guard's eyes flicked to the coin. He hesitated, then snatched it, as if afraid someone would see him taking bribes in the rain. "We got enough mouths," he muttered, but he shifted aside. "Go on then, talk to the kitchen. If you're caught stealing, they'll hang you off the bridge." Arya nodded, stepping through. Inside the first castle yard, the world was all stone and wet. Men moved like ants, hauling barrels, stacking wood, sweeping puddles that would only fill again. The air smelled of horse and smoke and boiled cabbage. Somewhere a smith hammered, sparks bright against gloom. Arya kept her head down and followed the flow of bodies toward the inner passages. The twins was a maze, and mazes were meant to trap. She passed a row of servants carrying linens, white cloth that would soon be stained with wine and grease and, if Arya failed, blood. She passed men in better armor, Frey men with rings and arrogance, barking orders. She saw a fat boy chasing a dog through the mud, laughing, unaware of anything beyond his own noise. The sight made Arya's chest ache in a strange way. In another world, she might have chased a dog too, laughing, safe. She found the kitchen by scent before she found it by sight: meat roasting, bread baking, onions frying. Warmth spilled out through an open doorway, fogging in the cold air. Inside, chaos ruled. Pots steamed. Women shouted. A man with a red face threw a ladle across the room when someone dropped a tray. Arya stepped in and became small. A cook with arms like hams turned on her. "Who are you?" "Arya," Arya said. Lies came easier when they were old. "I want work." The cook's eyes narrowed. "Can you peel?" "Yes." "Can you shut your mouth?" "Yes." The cook jabbed a thumb toward a pile of turnips. "Then peel. And if you nick yourself, you'll bleed in my stew and Lord Walder will have my head." Arya sat, took up a knife and began to peel. As her hands moved, her eyes moved too. She watched who came and went. She watched where the barrels were stored. She watched which door led to the wine cellars and which led to the hall. She watched the Freys. Once, a thin old man shuffled past with a cane. His mouth twisted in a sour line, eyes bright and cruel. Servants bowed and flinched as he passed. Arya did not need to be told who he was. Lord Walder Frey's presence made the air feel colder, as if even the fire feared him. Her fingers tightened on the knife. The poison sat hidden in her pocket, warm against her thigh. Somewhere outside these walls, her family was riding toward this place, believing in peace. Arya peeled turnips until her hands ached, and she listened for the sound that would tell her where to strike. The kitchen taught Arya what castles were really made of. Not stone, not banners, not lordly speeches. Castles were made of sweat and fear. They were made of women with cracked hands hauling boiling water, of boys with bruised faces carrying trays too heavy for their arms. They were made of the small cruelties that never made it into songs. A slap for dropping a loaf, a kick for being too slow, a curse for looking up when you should look down. In Winterfell, servants had been family in a way Arya had never understood until they were gone. Old Nan's stories, Hullen's grumbles, Micken's soot-stained smile. Here, servants were prey. The Freys treated them like dirt and then demanded clean floors. Arya learned names quickly because names were how you moved through a place. The head cook was called Bennis, though no one said it to his face. A kitchen girl with red hands was Mela. A boy with a limp carried water and answered to Toad. Arya slipped them bits of kindness when she could. A peeled turnip for Toad, a whispered warning to Mela when Bennis's temper rose. Kindness did not cost much, and it bought something priceless. She learned where the bread was baked and where the salt was kept in heavy sacks. She learned that the Freys drank from 3 different stores: common ale for common men, better wine for the lesser lords, and the private casks kept under lock for Lord Walder's own table and favored sons. She learned that keys mattered. The cellar keys hung from a hook by the steward's door, watched by a fat man who slept more than he woke. She learned that the hall would be decorated with river reeds and candles, that extra tables were being built, that musicians had arrived with their instruments wrapped in oilcloth, and that the Freys had been unusually careful about the order of service. Order was another kind of weapon. 2 days into her work, Arya caught sight of a man she recognized. Not by name, but by the feel he brought with him. He moved like a knife sliding from a sheath, quiet and cold. His hair was dark, his eyes pale. He wore a Frey cloak, but it sat on him like a borrowed skin. Walder Rivers, someone whispered, voice low. Bastard of the late Lord Stevrin, called Black Walder. A hard one. Arya watched him speak with another man in a narrow passage. One with a pink, damp face and fine rings. His lips turned up like he smelled something rotten. The second man's limp was pronounced, his smile thin as paper. Lothar Frey, Mela hissed under her breath. The one they call the lame. He counts everything. Arya tucked the names away. Black Walder, Lothar Frey, names to sharpen. That night, as Arya carried a bucket of peelings to the yard, she saw something else that made her blood go cold. Men unloading crates marked with a lion's paw. Lannister, not openly, not with banners. Just crates, slipped in among sacks of flour as if they were nothing. Men in Frey colors carried them quickly into the keep while guards turned their heads the other way. Arya's grip tightened on the bucket until her knuckles went white. A wedding with Lannister crates and Lannisport musicians and Frey laughter. She knew now, not the full shape of it, but enough. There was a blade hidden here, and it was meant for wolves. She began to plan in earnest. The poison in her pocket felt heavier each day. She took it out at night, in the corner of the servants' loft, and stared at the clay vial until her eyes blurred. The old woman's warning echoed. Poison doesn't care who drinks. Arya cared. Arya cared too much, so she could not poison everything. She would poison the men who would make the trap snap shut, the men who would lock doors, the men who would signal the musicians, the men who would pour the first cups at the high table. A few drops in the right place could save hundreds, or doom them all if she was careless. On the 3rd day, Arya heard the name that mattered most, spoken with reverence and fear. Roose Bolton is coming, Bennis said, voice thick with contempt. With the king. Arya's stomach lurched. Bolton. Flayed men. Cold eyes. If Roose Bolton was coming, then the trap was not just Frey spite. It was something bigger, sharper, planned. Arya wiped her hands on her skirt and looked toward the hall door. She needed proof. She needed to know when. She needed to know how. She needed to know what music would be played. Arya found the proof where she had found most truths since the war began, in other people's carelessness. It was near midnight. The servants' loft was quiet except for snores and the occasional cough. Arya slipped out, barefoot, moving through the dark passages the way she had moved through Harrenhal's corridors when she'd been no one and everyone at once. The twins had fewer ghosts than Harrenhal, but its stones held their own secrets. Every draft carried whispers. Every door had ears behind it. She followed a sound, low voices, down a narrow stair and along a corridor where torches burned in iron brackets, their flames struggling against damp. She kept to shadow, heart beating slow and steady in her throat. At a bend in the corridor, she saw them. Lothar Frey leaned on his cane, his face half lit by torch fire, eyes bright as coins. Beside him stood Black Walder, arms folded, mouth set hard. A 3rd man faced them, cloak gray, posture stiff. One of Bolton's, though he wore no flayed man openly. Arya had learned what to look for. Bolton men moved like men who had watched others scream and felt nothing. They spoke softly, but the corridor carried sound like a trough carries water. The musicians arrived? Lothar asked. Aye, Black Walder said. They've been told the song. The Bolton man's voice was quiet, almost polite. And the doors? Lothar's smile tightened. The doors will close. The benches will be moved. The king's men will be placed where we want them. Your lord can be easy. Arya's breath caught. Closed doors. Benches moved. Placed where we want them. Her mind filled the hall with wolves and turned it into a pen. The Bolton man held out a letter, sealed with red wax. Lothar took it with careful fingers, as if it were a blade. Arya saw the wax for only a heartbeat, a smear, a stamp. But she recognized it anyway because she had stared at seals in Harrenhal's Raven's messages until she'd learned the way power left its mark. Flayed man, Roose Bolton's seal. Lothar tucked the letter into his sleeve. Lord Walder wants his assurances, he said. The Bolton man inclined his head. He will have them. Gold, Black Walder asked, blunt. A lion pays well, the Bolton man said, and there was something like amusement in his eyes. And a lion never forgets. Arya's stomach turned. The Lannister crates, the Lannisport musicians, the talk of lions. The Bolton man stepped closer. There must be no mistake, he murmured. No hesitation. When the song begins, you do your part. Lothar's cane tapped once on stone. We know our part. Arya wanted to leap out and drive a knife into his throat. She wanted to scream warnings until the castle shook. But she stayed in the shadow, because she was small and alone, and knives and screams were not plans. Plans were quieter. The men moved away, their footsteps fading. Arya stayed still long after they were gone, staring at the place where Bolton wax had glinted. When her legs finally moved, they carried her back toward the kitchen, toward heat and knives and keys and barrels. Her hands did not shake now. They felt steady, almost calm. She knew the shape of it. She knew the timing. She knew the signal, the song. A wedding meant to be a slaughter. Arya crouched in the dark behind a barrel of salt and pulled out the clay vial. The powder inside seemed paler than before, harmless as flour. Poison doesn't care who drinks, the old woman had said. Arya did. So she would choose, and she would choose carefully. She whispered the new names into the dark, adding them to her list like stones dropped into deep water. Walder Frey, Lothar Frey, Walder Rivers, Roose Bolton. And then she whispered one more, not because it belonged, but because it burned in her. Theon Greyjoy. Her list was a river too, and it ran toward the twins. The cellar smelled like old secrets. It was cool and damp, the air thick with the sweet, sour bite of wine. Stone arches curved overhead like ribs. Rows of casks sat stacked 2 and 3 high, their oak darkened by age, each marked with chalk scratches and wax seals that meant something to stewards and lords. A rat watched Arya from the shadow of a barrel, whiskers twitching. Arya watched it back. Rats survived. Rats knew where the crumbs fell. She had stolen the cellar key from the fat steward when he dozed after supper, his head lolling, mouth open. It had been easy, too easy. Men thought locks were protection. Locks were only confidence made of iron. Now she moved between the barrels with a torch in one hand, its flame throwing jittering shadows that made the cellar seem alive. Her other hand held the clay vial. The weight of it pulled at her pocket like a stone. She stopped at a cask marked with a symbol she had learned to recognize. A small scratch that meant the high table. Better wine guarded more closely. The wine that would be poured for Lord Walder and his chosen. The wine that would wet the mouths that spoke the orders. Arya set the torch in a bracket and knelt. Her fingers found the bung. She worked it loose slowly, the way she had worked knots on ropes, patient and steady. When it finally gave, the scent of wine rose up, rich and dark. She lifted the vial, hesitated. If she poured too much, they would die. If they died too quickly, the hall would erupt before the doors could close, before she could do anything else. Panic could save wolves, but panic could also get wolves killed, trampled in the crush, cut down in confusion. If she poured too little, they would only sweat and laugh and curse the food, and the music would still begin. Arya remembered the old woman's fingers pinching powder. This much for sickness. this much more for death. Arya pinched a measure with trembling fingers, then forced herself to breathe. She let the powder fall into the open cask. It vanished into the wine like snow into a river. She replaced the bung, pressing it tight. She wiped her fingers on her skirt as if she could erase what she'd done. One cask, not enough. She moved to the next, heart beating steady, torchlight dancing. She chose casks meant for the men who mattered most. Those she had seen in the corridors, those she had heard bark orders, those who would sit near Lord Walder and Lothar and Black Walder. She did not touch the common ale. She did not touch the barrels marked for servants. She did not touch the small casks destined for the women's tables. She tried to be precise. Precision was mercy. The rat darted closer, sniffing. Arya's gaze flicked to it, and an ugly thought came unbidden. A rat would drink anything. A rat would tell her if she'd poured too much. Arya's stomach twisted. She reached for a crust of bread she had stolen earlier, crumbled it, and tossed it toward the rat. The rat scurried forward, seized it, and retreated. Not poison, she told herself. Not like that. She worked until her hands felt numb. 3 casks. 4. 5. Enough that, if the right men drank, the right men would fall. When she finished, she stood in the cellar's cold and listened to her own breath. She felt smaller than ever. A girl in a stone belly beneath a castle that did not know her name. But she also felt something else, a hard edge inside her. She had acted. Above, the twins prepared for a wedding that was meant to be a slaughter. They hung banners and swept floors and stacked benches, laughing, dreaming of wolves bleeding on their stones. Arya Stark had put a darkness in their wine. She took the torch and started back toward the stairs, every step careful. The key was heavy in her pocket. The clay vial was lighter now, nearly empty, and that frightened her more than its weight had. At the top of the stairs, she paused, listening. Somewhere in the castle, a horn sounded, an arrival signal. Voices rose, footsteps hurried. The king was coming. From the battlements, the world looked like a painting done in ash and water. The river churned below, swollen and green, slamming itself against stone as if it wanted to tear the bridge down. Beyond the walls, the road unwound through mist and rain, and on it came banners. Wolves first, gray and white snapping in the wind. Dire wolves. Stark. Arya stood among servants hauling trays of bread toward the hall, and for a heartbeat her throat closed so tight she could hardly breathe. She wanted to run. She wanted to scream his name until the sky split. Rob. But she could not be Arya Stark here. Arya Stark would be dragged into a corner and slit like a rabbit. Arya Stark would become another secret the twins kept. So she stayed airy, head down, shoulders hunched, hands steady on the tray. She watched through the corner of her eye as the host approached. Muddy horses, men in damp cloaks, banners of the river lords trailing behind. The war had carved them down. They looked thinner than the songs would have had them. They looked tired. They looked like men who believed a wedding might be a pause, a breath, a moment of peace. The Freys on the walls watched them too. Arya saw crossbows tucked close behind parapets, as casual as walking sticks. She saw Frey men with smiles that did not reach their eyes. She saw Black Walder pacing like a hound, restless. She saw Lothar Frey standing with his cane, posture stiff, as if he was counting heartbeats. She saw Lord Walder himself in a high chair draped in furs, looking down from a balcony like a spider waiting for flies. The sight of him made Arya's fingers itch for the knife at her belt. Guessed right, she thought bitterly. Bread and salt. She carried bread now. She would watch salt be poured. She wondered if her mother would take a bite and believe, if her brother would smile because he wanted to believe. Arya's stomach twisted again with fear. Not fear of dying, but fear of being too late. The poison was in the wine, but wine was only one part. The doors, the benches, the song. She needed to stop the song. She moved through the bustle of preparation, letting noise and chaos hide her. Servants ran like ants driven by shouts. Tables were laid with cloth. Candles were set in rows. A place was made for musicians at the edge of the hall, their instruments still wrapped, their faces wary. One of them, a thin man with clever hands, looked up as Arya passed. His eyes met hers, and something flickered there. Not recognition, not yet, only the look of a man who knew he was being used. Arya set down her tray and slipped away into shadow. She found the musician's corner and crouched behind a stack of empty barrels, listening to their murmured talk. Their accents were Western, their clothes better than most sellswords. But there was fear in the way they kept glancing toward the doors, toward the Frey guards. "What song?" one whispered. "The one they told us," the thin man answered, voice tight. "The one that starts it." Arya's heart hammered. She did not know what the song was called, but she knew now that it would be the knife's edge. She eased back, mind racing. Poison would buy her moments. Men sweating, men vomiting, men stumbling, confusion in the hall. Moments were not enough if the trap still snapped shut. She needed to make the signal fail, make the order break, make men hesitate. She needed to pull the teeth from the dogs. Outside, horns sounded again. Closer now, louder. The Stark host was at the gate. Arya's hands curled into fists. She could not be everywhere. She could not control all the doors. She could not watch every cup. But she could choose where to put herself. She slipped down a side passage toward the hall's main doors, where the benchmen would gather, where the Frey guards would stand ready to close the world on wolves. She moved like a shadow between torchlight and stone, feeling the castle breathe around her. In her pocket, the empty clay vial pressed against her thigh like a reminder. You have done what you can. Now do more. As the first of the northern men crossed the bridge into the twins, Arya Stark pressed her back to cold stone and listened to the sounds of welcome rising like a lie. And she waited for the first sip of poisoned wine to turn laughter into panic. The first thing Arya saw was the dire wolf. Not carved or stitched, not a boy's drawing on a scrap of wood, but the real thing on cloth. Gray on white, snapping wet in the wind, as if it were trying to bite the rain. It came through the gate like a memory made solid, and for a heartbeat Arya forgot the stink of the twins, forgot the poison in the cellar, forgot that she was airy with turnip peel under her nails and soot on her cheeks. Then she saw her brother. Robb Stark rode beneath that banner with his shoulders squared and his jaw set in the way Eddard Stark had once set his, as if a straight spine could hold back the whole world. Rain plastered his hair to his brow. His cloak was heavy and dark. The crown he wore was a simple thing, more iron than gold, but it made every Frey at the gate look at him twice and swallow whatever insolence they'd been saving. And beside him came their mother. Catelyn Stark's face was thinner than Arya remembered it, her cheeks hollowed by grief, her eyes too bright, but the line of her mouth was the same, a blade drawn tight. She watched the twins as if the stones might move. She watched the men on the walls as if she could see through their smiles and into their hearts. If Arya could have reached her, if Arya could have put her small hands on her mother's arm, she would have felt the trembling there, the careful restraint. Behind them rode others Arya knew by stories and glimpses. Great John Umber broad as a bear, laughing too loudly at a Frey jest that didn't deserve laughter. Edmure Tully with the look of a man walking to an altar with a rope around his throat. And Roose Bolton, pale and still as winter water, his horse stepping lightly through mud as if it did not wish to dirty him. Roose Bolton's calm chilled Arya more than the rain. The Freys poured out their welcome like sour wine. Lord Walder's sons and grandsons crowded the yard, offering hands that were damp and unwilling, calling Robb your grace, with mouths that wanted to say wolf. Lord Walder himself did not come down into the mud. He watched from above, from a balcony hung with wet banners, a thin old man in furs with eyes like black beads. When he smiled, it was not warmth, it was appetite. Arya held a tray in her hands that she could barely feel. Bread, salt, little cups of spiced wine meant to sweeten the air. Servants moved around her in a blur, heads bowed, feet slipping. She was one of them. No one looked at her twice. No one saw a Stark in rags. Guessed right, Arya thought, staring at the bread. Bread and salt, the promise that even enemies would not spill blood under a roof. She watched Catelyn Stark take the bread, watched her fingers break it, watched her eyes flick up, sharp and searching. as if she could taste lies in the crumbs. Robb ate too because he had to, because refusing would be the same as shouting treason. He smiled for a moment, a thin thing, and said something to Edmure that made Edmure's shoulders loosen by a fraction, as if the words were a hand at his back. Arya wanted to run to him. She wanted to cry his name, to tell him to leave now, to take Grey Wind and his men and their mother and ride until the twins were only a nightmare behind them. But her feet stayed planted in mud, because she had put poison in the wine, and now she had to see it through. Because if she ran, she would only die, and her death would save no one. So she kept her head down, and she listened to the Freys' voices rise in false welcome, and she counted the men she needed to fall. The sept they used was a damp stone chamber dressed up with candles and river reeds until it pretended to be holy. Arya stood at the back with the other servants, a pitcher in her hands, and watched her uncle walk toward his wedding like a man marching into a river he could not swim. Edmure Tully had always been loud in stories, full of easy pride, but there was nothing easy in him now. He looked pale beneath his finery, his hair slicked back, his eyes fixed on a point beyond Rosalind Frey's veil, as if he could see a different life waiting there. Rosalind Frey shook, not with joy, not with shy happiness, but with fear so plain it seemed to vibrate in the air. Tears clung to her lashes. When she lowered her head, the veil trembled. Arya saw her small hands twist together, knuckles white, and for a moment she felt a bitter kinship. Girls were always being traded. Girls were always being used to mend men's pride and stitch up wars. Robb stood with his mother near the front, his face solemn, his mouth set. Catelyn Stark watched Rosalind Frey with an expression Arya knew, pity wrapped in suspicion. Arya saw her mother's fingers tighten on Robb's arm, saw the way her gaze flicked to the doors, to the guards, to the shadows where crossbowmen might hide if this had been a different kind of hall. Roose Bolton did not look at Rosalind. Roose Bolton looked at nothing. His eyes were pale and calm, his posture perfect, as if he were attending a funeral rather than a wedding, and perhaps he was. Lord Walder Frey made the vows into a performance. He called out jests from his high chair. He coughed and wheezed and smiled as if the seven themselves were his guests. The Freys around him laughed too quickly, too eagerly, trying to please a man who could not be pleased. When Edmure Tully took Rosalind's hand, Arya saw his fingers tremble. When he kissed her, the hall clapped and shouted, and Walder Frey's grin widened in satisfaction, as if he had just won a game. Arya's throat tightened. She looked away before tears could rise. Tears were weakness. Tears blurred the world. Arya needed the world sharp. They led the couple out with music, soft pipes, nothing grand yet, and the hall began to shift. Tables were laid for feasting, cups were placed. Servants rushed in lines like river currents, carrying trenchers of bread and plates of meat. The musicians waited near their corner, instruments held close like shields. Arya saw their eyes dart, nervous, and she thought of the whispered words in the corridor. When the song begins. Not this song. Later, the smell of roasted boar and spiced wine thickened the air. The Freys began to laugh louder, already drunk on anticipation. The Northerners answered with their own noise, trying to make it feel like a true wedding, trying to drown unease in ale. Arya moved with the servants, pouring, refilling, keeping her face down. She watched the high table as if it were a battlefield. She watched who sat where. Lothar Frey near Lord Walder, Cain propped beside him. Black Walder standing behind, restless. Frey guards in the right places, hands always near their belts. Bolton men placed too close to Robb, smiling politely, eyes cold. The trap was laid. Now she had to spring it first. The first toast was to peace. It was a cruel joke, and Arya could see the humor in it on the Freys' faces. Robb stood and lifted his cup, his voice carrying over the clatter of plates and the low roar of the hall. He spoke of ending bloodshed, of joining houses, of the Riverlands and the North standing together against lions and treachery. He spoke well. He sounded like a king. Arya felt pride claw at her chest, sharp and painful, because pride was dangerous when it reminded you what you'd lost. Lord Walder Frey raised his own cup with a thin smile, as if he were humoring a child. "To the king in the north," he rasped, voice dripping with false sweetness. The Freys cheered too loudly. The Northerners cheered too stubbornly. It all rang like armor struck with a hammer. Arya moved along the high table with a pitcher, pouring. Her hands did not shake. She had poured wine 100 times these past days, learned how to keep her wrist smooth, learned how to look like she was listening when she was watching. She filled Lord Walder's cup from the pitcher that had been drawn from the casks she had chosen. She filled Lothar Frey's cup. She filled the cup set before Black Walder. She watched their mouths as they drank. Nothing happened at first. For a breath, Arya feared the poison had failed, feared the damp had spoiled it, feared the old woman had cheated her. Lord Walder smacked his lips and demanded more gravy. Lothar Frey leaned close to Roose Bolton and murmured something that made Bolton's pale mouth twitch in a near smile. Black Walder scanned the hall like a hound sniffing for blood. Roose Bolton only sipped. A small sip, barely wetting his lips, and then he set the cup down again. His eyes flicked once to the doors, to the musicians' corner, to the benches that had been arranged oddly. Too tight, too controlled. Arya's stomach tightened. Bolton would not let himself be dulled. Bolton was too careful. The second toast came, and the third. Edmure drank because he was expected to. Rosalind Frey drank little, eyes down, cheeks wet. The Freys grew louder. The Northerners grew warmer. For a moment the hall almost became what it pretended to be. Then Lothar Frey wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and frowned. It was a small thing, a twitch of discomfort, the sort of expression men wore when a boot pinched or a tooth ached. Arya's heart jumped anyway. She watched him swallow again, harder this time, as if his throat had suddenly gone dry. Black Walder shifted his weight, rolled his shoulders as if to loosen them, and then paused. His hand drifted to his belly. His jaw clenched. His eyes narrowed, scanning the table, the cups, the servants. Lord Walder Frey coughed. A wet, hacking sound that made him spit into a cloth. "Wine sour," he snapped, glaring at a servant who flinched. "Who tapped this cask?" Arya kept moving, her face blank, pouring for other lords, other cups. She poured for Catelyn Stark once, and her mother's eyes flicked to her hands. Quick, sharp, suspicious. Arya's breath caught. For a heartbeat she feared recognition. But then Catelyn's gaze moved on, already searching for the next danger. The poison was a river now. It had entered mouths. It had begun to flow. Arya felt the moment stretch, thin as a thread. All it would take was one cough too loud, one man falling too early, and the hall would tip from pretense into chaos. Somewhere in the shadows, musicians waited for their cue. Arya watched their hands. The first man to break was not a lord. It was a Frey cousin at a lower place on the high table, a broad-faced man with a red nose who had been drinking as if he meant to empty the river. He laughed at some jest, mouth open wide, and then the laugh became a gag. His eyes bulged. He slapped at his own throat, knocking his cup over. Dark wine spilled across the white cloth like blood. For a heartbeat the hall only stared. Then the man retched. The sound was sudden and obscene, and it cut through laughter like a blade. Heads turned. A woman shrieked. The Frey cousin vomited again, bending double, his hands clawing at the table edge. Wine and bile splattered plates. A serving girl stumbled back, horrified. Lord Walder Frey's face tightened with fury. "Idiot," he rasped. "Can't hold his drink." But his words broke as another cough seized him, wet and tearing. He pressed a cloth to his mouth, eyes watering. When he pulled the cloth away, it was stained dark. Lothar Frey swayed. Arya saw it in the way his cane shifted, in the way his lips parted as if he could not get enough air. Sweat shone on his brow. He swallowed, grimacing, and his hand slid to his belly like he meant to hold himself together by force. Black Walder's hand tightened on the back of a chair. His face went from hard to startled in a breath. the way a man's face changes when he realizes the ground beneath him is not solid. He glanced down at the cups, at the spilled wine, at the servants moving in panic, and Arya saw suspicion ignite in his eyes. Someone tried to laugh it off. "Bad oysters," a Frey called loud and false. But then another man at the high table stood too quickly, knocking his bench back, and staggered, his face gray. He lurched toward the side of the hall and vomited onto the rushes, gasping like a fish pulled from water. The hall's noise changed, laughter thinned, voices rose in questions. Chairs scraped, men craned their necks to see. Frey guards shifted, hands on hilts now, eyes darting. Arya Stark, his smile vanished. He rose from his seat, not fully, but enough that Arya saw his hand go to his sword. His gaze swept the hall, taking in the sick men, the tightening Frey faces, the doors. He looked at his mother, and Catelyn Stark's expression was already hard, her eyes bright with a cold certainty. "Poison," her face said without words. The Freys began to shout at the servants. Bennis the cook burst into the hall red-faced, roaring that his stew was clean, that no one had touched his pots. A Frey lord slapped him across the mouth anyway. Servants scrambled like frightened mice, trying to wipe vomit, trying to refill cups, trying to pretend the world was not tipping. And through it all, the musicians stayed still. Arya watched them, heart hammering. If the song began now, if the doors closed now, the hall would become a slaughterhouse in the confusion. She had bought moments. Now she had to steal the signal. Arya moved when no one was looking at her, when everyone was looking at vomit and shouting and Lord Walder's rage. She slipped along the edge of the hall, keeping close to walls and shadows, becoming part of the chaos the way a drop becomes part of a river. Servants ran past her with cloths. A Frey knight shoved a boy aside. Someone screamed that the wine was cursed. Someone else shouted that it was northern sorcery. Arya let them shout. She reached the musician's corner and crouched behind a stack of empty barrels. The musicians stood in a tight knot, faces pale, instruments clutched like lifelines. Their leader, the thin man with clever hands, kept looking toward the high table, toward the Frey captain barking at them. "Play," the Frey captain hissed, voice sharp with panic. "Play the bloody song now." The musician swallowed. "My lord, there's trouble." "Play?" the captain snarled, and shoved him hard enough that the man stumbled. His fiddle case slipped, nearly falling. Arya's fingers tightened on her knife. Not the musicians, she told herself. Not them. They were not wolves or lions. They were just hands being used. But the song would be a knife. Arya crept closer, low, her body pressed into shadow. When the musicians shifted, when the captain turned his head to shout at a servant, Arya slipped her blade out and hooked it under the strings of the nearest fiddle. She pulled. The strings snapped with a soft, sharp twang that vanished beneath the hall's noise. Arya's heart slammed in her chest. She cut the next, and the next, quick and silent, the broken ends curling like dead worms. A drummer lifted his hands uncertainly. Arya reached up and scraped her knife along the drum's bindings, loosening them just enough that the skin sagged. Not obvious at a glance, obvious when struck. The thin musician frowned, sensing something wrong, and looked down at his instrument. He plucked one string. It gave no sound. His eyes widened. The Frey captain shoved him again. "Now!" The musician tried to lift his bow, tried to set it to strings that were no longer there. Panic flashed across his face. He opened his mouth to speak, but the captain's hand went to his sword. Arya's mouth went dry. If the musician cried out, if the captain struck him, the hall's focus might swing here. Men with blades might converge. Arya might be cut down before she could do more. She rose just enough to be seen by the musician alone, a shape in shadow, eyes bright. She shook her head once, hard. "Don't. Not yet. Not like that." The musician stared at her, confused, terrified. Then his gaze flicked to the captain's sword hand, and the musician did something brave and stupid. He dropped his fiddle. It clattered to the floor, broken and useless. and he spread his hands. "My lord," he stammered loudly. "It's ruined. The strings. Someone." The Frey captain's face contorted with rage. He grabbed the musician by the collar. "You useless!" A sudden retch at the high table cut him off. A Frey lord toppled forward, knocking plates and cups. The captain jerked his head toward the commotion, distracted, still gripping the musician. Arya slid back into shadow like smoke. The signal was fraying. The song could not begin cleanly. Now she needed the doors. The door's bar was thicker than Arya's arm. It rested on iron hooks beside the hall's side entrance, meant to drop into place when the moment came and turn stone walls into a cage. Arya had watched the Frey guards glance at it all evening, the way men glance at a knife they are eager to use. Now the guards moved to it. One of them, a bull-necked man with a scarred chin, gripped the bar and heaved it up with practiced ease. His companion, thinner, already pale, tried to lift the other end and nearly dropped it. Sweat shone on his forehead. His lips were gray. He gagged once, swallowed hard, and his eyes watered. The poison had found him too. Good, Arya thought, cold and fierce. Good. But the bull-necked guard was still strong. He could set the bar alone if he had to. Arya slipped up behind them, silent as a prayer, knife in her hand. She did not strike for the throat. A throat strike would spray blood, draw attention. She struck low, hard, and fast. Her blade drove into the bull-necked guard's thigh. The man roared, shock turning his face savage. His grip loosened. The bar crashed down, slamming into the stone with a heavy clang. The sound turned heads. Arya's heart jumped, but she did not run. She kicked the bar away from the hooks, sending it skidding across the floor into shadow. The sickly guard staggered back, eyes wide. "What?" Arya slammed the flat of her hand into his stomach and shoved. He bent double with a choked sound and vomited onto his own boots, collapsing to his knees. The bull-necked guard grabbed for Arya, fingers closing on her sleeve. Arya twisted, yanking free, and drove her elbow into his ribs the way Syrio had taught her. Quick, precise. His breath whooshed out. He tried to curse, but pain swallowed the words. A shadow moved in the corridor beyond. Arya's eyes snapped up and met pale, cold eyes. A Bolton man stepped toward the door, dagger in hand. His expression was calm, almost courteous, as if he were walking up to offer a toast. He glanced at the fallen bar, at the struggling Frey guard, at Arya. Small, dirty, holding a knife that looked like a toy beside his steel. Recognition flickered across his face. Not of Arya, but of what she was doing. He lunged. Arya darted aside, knife raised. The dagger swept past where her throat had been. She felt the wind of it. She slashed at his forearm and nicked flesh. Blood welled. The Bolton man did not flinch. He grabbed her wrist with iron strength, twisting. Pain flared up Arya's arm. Her fingers went numb. Her knife clattered to stone. The Bolton man leaned close. "Little rat," he murmured, breath warm against her ear. "You've gnawed the wrong grain." Arya drove her knee up between his legs. The Bolton man's breath hitched. His grip loosened by a fraction. Arya wrenched free, snatched her knife from the floor, and darted through the door into the corridor beyond. Not running away, but running deeper, because behind her the hall was beginning to change. The noise had shifted from confusion to anger. A shout rang out sharp, northern. Steel scraped from leather. The trap was breaking. Now it would try to bite anyway. Arya heard the first scream as she ran. It rose above the hall's din like a hawk's cry, sharp and sudden, and it made every hair on her arms stand up. She skidded to a stop in the corridor and pressed herself against stone, breathing hard, listening as the twins began to devour itself. Inside the hall, the sounds layered. Chairs scraping, men shouting, steel singing as it left scabbards. A crash as a table overturned. A woman's shriek. A roar that could only belong to Great John Umber, huge and furious. The kind of roar that made men remember they had hearts. Arya risked a glance through the doorway's crack. The hall was chaos now. Not a clean slaughter, not a planned execution, but a brawl with knives in its teeth. Robb Stark stood half-risen, his sword out, his gaze sweeping like a general's, trying to understand in a breath what had taken weeks to plan. Catelyn Stark was on her feet too, dagger in hand, her face transformed from wary to feral, as if all the mother in her had become wolf. Frey men stumbled and gagged. One clutched his belly and fell to his knees, retching wine and bile. Another tried to stand and toppled into a bench, knocking cups onto the floor. Servants fled, scattering like startled birds. The Frey captain at the musicians' corner screamed orders, but the musicians were frozen, their instruments broken or useless, their eyes wide with terror. On the gallery above, crossbowmen appeared, Frey men with bolts loaded, faces tight. Arya saw them lift their weapons, saw them hesitate as their own kin lurched and vomited below. Confusion was a wedge. Confusion split commands in half. A bolt loosed anyway, thudding into a table leg, inches from a Riverlord's knee. The Riverlord shouted and drew steel. A second bolt hit a man in the shoulder. Blood splashed, panic sharpened. The Freys tried to close ranks, but their ranks were sick and staggering. Some clutched their throats, eyes bulging, faces flushed. The poison did not kill cleanly. It turned men into creatures of need and fear. It made them unreliable. Robb Stark's men surged toward him, forming a knot of shields and blades, shouting for order. Robb's voice cut through, fierce and commanding. To the doors! Out now! But the doors were where the trap lived. Arya's gaze flicked to the place she had kicked the bar away. Frey guards were scrambling, one limping, one vomiting, trying to set it again. A Bolton man moved through the press near Robb, too smooth, too calm, his hand drifting toward Robb's side like a lover's touch. Roose Bolton remained seated. That was the worst thing. Even in chaos, Roose Bolton did not rise. He sat with his pale face composed, as if he were watching mummers. His cup sat untouched. His eyes watched Robb not with anger, not with fear, but with measurement. Arya felt cold spread in her belly. Bolton had not been dulled. Bolton was still the blade. If Bolton struck now, in the confusion, it could still be enough. One clean knife into Robb's heart, and the North would bleed out no matter how many Freys vomited. Arya's fingers tightened around her knife. She could not reach Robb through that press of men, but she could reach something else. A sound rose suddenly from outside the hall. A deep, savage howl that rolled through stone and made men freeze. A direwolf's howl. Gray wind. Arya's heart slammed. That howl was wrong here. That howl meant the wolf had been trapped too. And if the wolf was trapped, the trap still had teeth. Arya turned and ran. The kennels stank of wet straw and fear. Arya found them by sound. The scrape of claws on stone, the low, constant growl that vibrated through walls. A dire wolf did not belong in a cage. A dire wolf belonged under open sky, running with blood on its teeth. Free. Gray wind belonged with Robb. The kennel chamber was a low stone room lit by 2 torches that guttered in the damp. Iron bars divided it into pens. Dogs whined in the dark. And at the far end, in a pen too small for him, Gray wind paced like a storm trapped in a bottle. His fur was dark with rain. His lips curled back from teeth long as Arya's hand. His eyes, gold and furious, snapped toward her the moment she entered. For a heartbeat, Arya forgot everything else. She forgot poison, knives, Freys. She saw Winterfell's yard, where she'd once watched Summer and Shaggy Dog tumble. She saw herself small and laughing. She saw her father's hand on her head. Then a Frey man stepped into her path. He was young, barely more than a boy, spear in hand, torchlight making his face look older than it was. Another Frey stood behind him, broader, sweating, his eyes glassy. The smell of sickness clung to him. "Where'd you think you're going?" the young one demanded, trying to sound brave. Arya's mind moved faster than fear. "Lord Lothar sent me," she lied, and she hated that she could say his name so easily now. "Says the beast is going mad. Needs calming." The young Frey hesitated. "Calming?" Arya lifted her empty hands. making herself small. "I've got meat," she lied again, glancing toward a hook where carcasses hung. "He said." The broader Frey gagged. He bent suddenly, retching onto the straw, spear clattering. The young one swore and half-turned, distracted. Arya moved. She slid past them with the quickness of a shadow and went straight to the hook by the door where the kennel keys hung, an iron ring heavy with different teeth. She had watched stewards and guards handle keys long enough to know the feel of power in metal. Her fingers closed around the ring. Gray wind slammed into the bars, growling, the iron rattling. The young Frey spun, eyes wide. "Hey!" Arya did not look at him. She knelt by Gray Wind's lock, hands shaking only a little, and shoved one key after another into the iron until one turned. The lock clicked. The young Frey rushed forward with his spear. Arya whipped around and threw the keyring into his face. Metal struck skin. The boy yelped, blinking, and his spear point wavered. Arya dove low, grabbed the spear shaft, and shoved it aside. The boy swung with his free hand, catching Arya's shoulder. Pain flared. Arya hissed, but she did not let go. Behind them, Gray Wind's growl became something deeper. Arya yanked the kennel door open. Gray Wind exploded out like thunder. He hit the young Frey full in the chest, knocking him into the straw. Teeth flashed. The boy screamed once, high and brief, and then the sound choked off as Gray Wind's jaws closed. Arya stumbled back, breath in her throat, watching blood darken straw. "Not clean," the old woman's voice whispered in her head. "Nothing is clean." The broader Frey tried to crawl away, still gagging. Gray Wind lifted his head, muzzle red, and looked at Arya. For a heartbeat, wolf and girl stared at each other. Arya pointed toward the hall. "Go," she breathed. "Go to him." Gray Wind's ears flicked, as if he understood, as if some part of him recognized the scent of Stark even through soot and lies. He bolted out of the kennel chamber and into the corridor beyond, a living weapon unleashed. Arya followed, because once the wolf was free, the castle could no longer pretend it was in control. Gray Wind's arrival changed everything. He came into the hall like a storm, wet fur shining, breath steaming, eyes blazing gold. He cleared a bench in a single bound, scattering cups and platters, and landed among Frey men with teeth bared. The sound he made was not a howl. It was a promise. Men screamed. Frey crossbowmen on the gallery jerked their weapons up, panic making their hands clumsy. One loosed a bolt that struck stone. Another hit a Frey man below by mistake. Shouts rose. "Hold! Don't shoot! Kill it!" But no command came clean anymore. Sick men gagged. Healthy men flinched. Fear made brothers into targets. Robb Stark turned at the first snarl, eyes widening. For a heartbeat, he looked like the boy Arya remembered, startled and fierce. Then he saw Gray Wind, truly saw him, and something in Robb's face hardened into a cold, beautiful rage. "Now!" Robb shouted, voice cracking like a whip. "Now out!" His men surged with renewed fury, using the wolf's chaos as cover. Great John Umber roared and smashed a chair into a Frey guard's face. "Steel met steel in flesjes." A river lord slammed into a crossbowman trying to descend the stairs. Bodies collided. Blood sprayed dark against candlelight. Catelyn Stark's hands trembled around her dagger. Arya saw her mother's eyes fill, not with softness, but with the kind of tears that came when a woman realized the world had tried to take everything and had failed to take it all. She shouted Robb's name, not pleading, but commanding him to live. Roose Bolton stood. He moved with deliberate calm, stepping back from his seat, his hand sliding under his cloak. Arya saw the glint of a blade half-drawn. Bolton's gaze locked on Robb's back as if it were a target painted on flesh. Arya's breath caught. There. That was the strike. A Bolton man near Robb shifted too, moving through the press, dagger low, aiming for a gap in armor. Arya could not reach with her feet. She could reach with something else. She scanned the floor in a frantic heartbeat. Spilled cups, fallen knives, broken crockery. Her gaze landed on a heavy silver goblet lying on its side, slick with wine. Arya snatched it up and hurled it. It struck the Bolton man's wrist with a hard clang. The dagger flew from his hand, spinning into the rushes. The man's head snapped toward Arya, eyes narrowing. But in that instant Robb's guard saw the movement and slammed a shield into the Bolton man's chest, knocking him back. Roose Bolton's eyes flicked, sharp, toward where the goblet had come from. Arya pressed herself into shadow, heart pounding so hard it hurt. Bolton's mouth tightened. He did not lunge blindly. He did not shout. He simply shifted his angle, stepping behind a Frey lord who was vomiting onto the table, using the man's body as cover. Bolton's knife remained half-hidden, patient. Patience was dangerous. Grey Wind lunged again, jaws closing around a Frey arm. The man screamed and fell. The wolf shook once, brutal, and released. Blood sprayed onto a fallen candle, snuffing it out. Smoke curled up, adding haze to chaos. Robb's men reached the main doors, pushing, fighting. Arya saw the sidebar she had kicked away still lying in shadow, not yet set. Frey guards tried to retrieve it, but one slipped in vomit and went down hard. Another swung at a northerner and took a sword in the belly. The hall was no longer a cage. It was a battlefield, and battle at least was honest. Arya's sleeve was wet with her own blood where the Frey boy had struck her, but she barely felt it. She watched Robb, watched Caitlin, watched Bolton, and she knew the worst was not over. A cornered lion was still a lion. Patient flayer was still a flayer. She needed one more break in the chain, one more tooth pulled, before the twins could swallow them again. They broke out into the rain like men bursting from a burning house. The bridge's cover turned the storm into a roar, water sheeting off beams, torches guttering in the wet. Feet pounded wood, steel clanged, shouts echoed between stone walls and vanished into the river's hunger below. Arya pressed herself along the side, moving with shadows, small enough that bigger bodies hit her, her breath tearing in her chest. Robb Stark ran at the center of it, sword in hand, his crown askew, his cloak ripped. Blood streaked his blade and his cheek. He looked back once, shouting for men to keep moving, for stragglers to run, for shields up. His voice was raw but steady, a king dragging his people out of a throat. Caitlin Stark was beside him, hair loose and plastered to her face, dagger clenched so tightly her knuckles were white. She moved like a woman possessed, not graceful, not careful, but unstoppable, her eyes scanning for threats even as rain blinded her. Arya saw her mother's mouth form silent words, prayers, curses, names. Grey Wind raced ahead, a dark blur, then turned, snarling at pursuing Freys. One Frey man lunged with a spear and missed as the wolf slipped aside and snapped at his wrist. The man screamed and fell back, colliding with another. Behind them, more Freys stumbled out onto the bridge in disarray. Some healthy and furious, some pale and sick, some bending to retch even as they tried to chase. The poison kept working, turning pursuit into confusion. A Frey captain shouted orders that no one obeyed. "Close the gate!" he screamed. "Bar it! Bar it!" But the bar had been kicked away, the guards sick, the chain of command fractured by vomit and wolf teeth. The twins, built to trap, had been forced open by the very chaos it had tried to wield. Arya's shoulder throbbed with each step. Her legs felt made of water. She kept her head down, her hood up, her knife slick in her hand. She could not go to Robb. She could not grab Caitlin and cry, "Mother, it's me. Not here. Not now." Recognition could turn to death in a breath. So she stayed a shadow alongside them, close enough to see, close enough to know. At the far end of the bridge, the night opened into the yard of the opposite castle. Horses screamed. Men scrambled to mount. Northerners shoved each other up into saddles, hauling wounded companions. Riverlords shouted for Edmure, for banners, for any order left. Arya saw Edmure Tully stumble out, face white, clothes torn, one hand smeared with blood that might not have been his. Rosalind Frey was nowhere. Arya did not look for her. Mercy had limits. A Frey arrow hissed out of the darkness and struck a northern man in the back. He went down hard. Another arrow followed, but it thudded into wood as gray wind leapt, snapping at the shaft. The wolf's fury bought seconds. Robb shoved a man toward a horse and swung himself up behind another, hauling a wounded captain with him. He looked back again, and Arya saw something in his eyes. Shock, disbelief, rage, and beneath it all a grief that hadn't yet found words. Catelyn climbed onto a horse without help, her hands shaking as she gripped the reins. She turned once, scanning the bridge, the yard, the shadows, as if she could feel a presence she could not name. Arya held her breath. For the smallest heartbeat, Catelyn Stark's gaze slid across the darkness where Arya crouched, across a small figure in a wet hood, blood on a sleeve, eyes too bright. Then another shout snapped her attention away, and the moment shattered like glass. The Stark riders surged forward, hoofs hammering mud. Gray wind ran alongside, a dark streak in rain. The Freys poured out after them, too late, too broken, too sick. Under the archway at the bridge's mouth, Roose Bolton stood half-hidden, watching. He did not chase. He did not shout. He only watched the wolves escape with pale, patient eyes, as if memorizing the shape of their flight. Arya felt that gaze like a blade laid gently against skin. She slipped away into the shadows of the yard, letting the chaos swallow her, because the wolves had lived, but the war had not ended. It had only changed its teeth.